When the kingdom's noise faded, what remained was the memory of how the people of Kongo once understood life. Before any foreign name for God had reached them, they already believed in a single creator, Nzambi Mpungu, the unseen force who made the world and breathed life into every being. They didn't imagine him as a statue or picture. They felt him through the rhythm of creation, the rain that fed the soil, the wind that carried prayers, the birth of a child, and the silence after a storm. They said Nzambi ruled everything but worked through the forces he created. The rivers had spirits that guarded water. The forests held protectors that watched over hunters. And their ancestors, the ones who had lived with truth, did not disappear. They became guides between worlds. To the Kongo mind, the seen and unseen were not separate. They were two halves of one living truth. This belief did not come from books. It came from observation, from seeing how life itself was organized with wisdom. When crops grew in harmony, when justice was served, when elders spoke peace into conflict, they felt the Creator's approval. And when greed or lies entered, nature responded. Floods, droughts, or sickness were not only disasters, they were messages reminding people that the balance had been broken. In that sense, they already understood what Islam would later confirm, that the world moves under divine order, that every act has consequence, and that the Creator is one, even if he is called by many names. Their way was not idolatry. It was early awareness. It was humanity's instinct to recognize that everything in creation answers to one command, one origin, one will. The Kongo people lived inside that awareness. It shaped how they treated the earth, how they honored their elders, and how they built community. They didn't separate daily life from worship. To farm was to pray, to share food was to give thanks, and to forgive was to restore divine order. Their entire society was a mirror of what the soul already knows. That peace begins when humans live in rhythm with the one who created them. The people of Kongo believed that death was not an ending, it was a return. When someone passed away, their spirit didn't disappear into silence. It crossed into another world, a bright and peaceful place they called Mpemba, the land of the white clay. They said that in Mpemba, the ancestors lived on, watching over the living. They were close, not far, like a soft wind that you couldn't see but could always feel. The people believed these ancestors could send messages through dreams, guide travelers, and protect children from harm. So they spoke to them with respect, not worship. They asked for their intercession, the way a child asks a parent to pray for them. During times of mourning or spiritual gatherings, people would rub white clay on their skin. This wasn't decoration. It was a symbol of purity and connection. White clay came from the riverbeds, the same place where life and death met. It reminded everyone that the body returns to the earth, but the soul belongs to something eternal. To live rightly was to honor those who came before. If someone broke a moral law by lying, stealing, or bringing harm to the innocent, it wasn't only the community that judged them. They feared the disappointment of their ancestors too, because every wrong action disturbed the peace between the worlds. This is the same truth Allah teaches in the Quran, that the living and the dead are known to Him, and nothing is ever lost. In Kongo's way, they had already sensed that truth. They didn't need a book to know that what you do today becomes your echo tomorrow. Their remembrance was not superstition. It was early faith in accountability. They lived with the constant awareness that unseen eyes were watching, not in fear, but in care. And that awareness, that spiritual consciousness, was the foundation that kept their hearts clean before corruption came. Every community in Kongo had its guides, men and women called Nganga, plural Banganga. They were not kings or judges, but people whose hearts were trusted. The Nganga were healers, teachers, and protectors of balance. When the body was sick, they used herbs and prayer. When the spirit was troubled, they listened, counseled, and restored peace through ritual. Their work was rooted in knowledge of the natural world. They knew which plants cured fever, which roots eased pain, which words calmed fear. But they also understood that healing was never only physical, it was spiritual. If the community was divided, if truth was hidden, if someone had broken trust, the Nganga saw that imbalance as illness too. In their hands, even simple things like wood, clay, or water could carry meaning. They crafted sacred objects called nkisi, carvings, shells, or bundles that held prayers inside. These weren't idols, they were reminders of promises made, a way to seal intentions between people and the unseen. To hold an nkisi was to say, I remember my word. The Banganga taught that everything carries energy, the land, the air, even words themselves. A blessing could lift a person, a curse could weaken them. So they spoke carefully, knowing that the tongue can heal or harm depending on the heart that moves it. In their way of life, Allah's pattern was visible even if His name had not yet reached their tongues. They understood that creation responds to intention, that justice, gratitude, and truth make a nation flourish, while lies and arrogance drain it from the inside. Their work kept Kongo's moral rhythm alive, guarding the people's connection to the unseen world. What the Banganga understood through nature and conscience was part of the same truth that Allah had already revealed through His prophets. The truth that sincerity heals, that justice preserves life, and that all creation moves under His will. To the people of Kongo, sound was never just sound. Rhythm was the bridge between what they could see and what they could feel, the heartbeat linking creation to meaning. Drums gathered the people in times of need and celebration. They marked births, funerals, and ceremonies, and sometimes served as signals to call the community together. In Central Africa, the word Ngoma was not only a drum, it also named the ritual, the dancing, the healing act, and the gathering itself. Music, drum, and community were woven into one pulse. This was not entertainment alone. In many Congo and Central African communities, the Ngoma ritual stood at the center of healing, social unity, and spiritual order. The drum was a sacred tool tied to kingship, health, and community life. Its wood, shape, and voice were chosen carefully because it was part of the moral fabric of existence, a vessel that carried more than sound. It carried intention. Songs and chants preserved memory before words were ever written. They told the stories of ancestors, journeys of families, victories, losses, and lessons about truth and humility. Children learned rhythm early because rhythm taught more than movement. It taught patience, timing, and unity. And when they danced, it was a form of gratitude. Every step and sway was a thank you to the unseen order that gave them life. Their language, Kikongo, moved with the same rhythm as their gatherings, steady, deep, and layered with meaning. A single word could hold both a fact and a feeling. Even simple greetings were small prayers. To ask someone how they were was to ask about their peace, not just their body. In this way, language and communal sound became tools of remembrance, keeping the people connected to one another and to what they could not see. Allah's signs are present in all created things. The Quran says, There is not a thing except that it glorifies him with praise, but you do not understand their glorification. Quran 17:44. In Congo, people lived close to that natural glorification. They raised their voices together, kept time in their work and gatherings, and used communal sound to remember names, lessons, and lineage. This reflects a state of Fitrah, innate awareness before clear revelation reached them. It is not a ruling or approval of music, but a record of how a people once tried to live in balance with the order Allah placed in creation. Life in the Kingdom of Kongo was built on cooperation and respect. Families were large and extended, not just parents and children, but grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins who all shared responsibility for one another. The home was not a private space. It was a small community where wisdom flowed from the elders downward and care flowed from the young upward. Descent was often traced through the mother's line, which meant that women held strong social positions. They were traders, counselors, and in some regions, local chiefs. Their words carried authority because they were seen as the root of continuity, the ones who gave life and protected its memory. Men farmed, hunted, and built. Women organized, traded, and advised. It was a system that kept balance rather than competition. Everyday life was guided by moral values rooted in conscience. Truthfulness, generosity, and hospitality were more than virtues. They were obligations. A person's honor was measured not by wealth, but by how they treated others. Sharing food with a traveler, caring for a neighbor's child, or showing patience in conflict was a form of worship because harmony kept the community aligned with the order of creation. Even in their social customs, Allah's design could be felt. The people didn't have written law, but their justice was alive in action. When someone caused harm, they were expected to restore peace through confession, apology, or compensation. It wasn't punishment they sought, but balance, the same principle that underlies divine justice. Their markets were places of exchange and storytelling. People came not only to trade goods like grain, pottery, and cloth, but to share news, songs, and lessons. There was rhythm even in commerce, an understanding that wealth meant nothing if it wasn't shared. Through this, the community stayed close-knit and aware of one another's needs. The Kingdom of Kongo thrived for centuries because its people understood something many civilizations later forgot. A nation survives not by force or fortune, but by moral order. As long as the people remembered fairness, gratitude, and care for the weak, the land prospered. It was when greed and pride entered that this harmony began to fade, reminding us that the laws of balance are timeless, written by the Creator into the nature of every society. The people of Congo lived by conscience long before they had written law. They believed that what kept a person clean was not status or wealth, but the peace they left behind wherever they went. Right and wrong were not measured by punishment. They were measured by balance. When someone harmed another, the goal was not revenge, it was restoration. If a dispute broke out, elders would gather the families and listen carefully to both sides. Truth had to be spoken out loud because silence was seen as a form of dishonesty. Once the truth was known, peace was restored through apology, a symbolic gift, or an act of service that renewed trust. This was their justice. Not a courtroom, but a living process that brought hearts back into alignment. They believed wrongdoing was more than a single act. It disturbed the harmony of the whole community. If lies spread, crops might fail. If an oath was broken, sickness could strike. It was not superstition. It was the belief that creation reacts to the moral state of people. and that spiritual and physical balance are deeply connected. This sense of accountability came from within, what Islam calls Fitrah, the inner awareness of truth placed in every human being. They did not yet know the words of revelation, but they lived by its essence, that every action has a weight, every intention has consequence, and that the Creator's order cannot be escaped, only respected. So when they prayed to their ancestors, sought forgiveness, or made peace after harm, they were not inventing a new way of life. They were responding to the divine design written in their own hearts, the same design that would later be completed and clarified through revelation. In their way, they understood what every nation learns in its own time, that justice without compassion breeds tyranny, and compassion without justice breeds chaos. Only when both walk together can a people stay upright. When we talk about Kongo, we aren't just studying a kingdom, we're remembering a state of being that many people have forgotten. These were human beings living in balance with the world around them, guided by instinct and conscience long before foreign ideas, religions, or rulers arrived. Their harmony wasn't perfection, but it was purity, a time when people still listened to the earth and treated one another with respect, because their hearts hadn't yet been clouded by greed or pride. This matters because it reminds us what Fitrah looks like in action. Before anyone called it that, they were living by it, caring for creation, honoring family, and restoring peace whenever harm was done. Allah placed that natural understanding inside every people on earth. It's the spiritual memory that whispers right from wrong, even without written law. Kongo's story is proof that morality, gratitude, and justice can exist in every land because they come from one source. When revelation later reached other parts of the world, through the prophets Allah had already sent, it wasn't introducing new truths. It was clarifying what humanity already knew deep inside. The people of Kongo may not have received those scriptures by name, but they lived by the same universal signs of order, gratitude, and accountability that every prophet taught. Their lives were a living example of how creation itself remembers the Creator, and that's why their story is sacred to remember. It shows that divine order is not tied to geography or language. It is written into human nature. Even before the Quran reached Africa, Allah's presence was already here, guiding hearts through conscience, testing nations through prosperity, and reminding the soul that peace is the natural state when we live in alignment with truth. By the late 1600s, the Kingdom of Kongo, once the pulse of order, beauty, and divine rhythm, began to crack under its own weight. The same rivers that once carried tribute and song now carried fear and loss. Provinces that had once moved like one body drifted apart. The Manikongo's word, once law, became only memory. Foreign traders had learned how to turn brother against brother. The people's trust in sacred exchange, that old system of giving and receiving for the sake of balance, was broken. Guns and gold replaced gratitude and faith. What was once shared became sold. What was once protected was taken. Yet even in that darkness, Allah's mercy did not depart. For every system that collapses, He preserves hearts that remember. When one age forgets truth, He plants its seed inside the next. The fall of Kongo was not the end of its story. It was a doorway. Through exile and enslavement, the rhythm of Kongo's faith, music, and language traveled across oceans, hidden inside prayer, heartbeat, and song. The world called it dispersion, but Allah called it decree. He turned a kingdom's sorrow into a map of remembrance, so that generations later, their descendants would rise and recognize themselves again. So when we tell this story, we don't end it with loss, we end it with return, because nothing Allah writes truly disappears. Every rise and fall is a sign that He is still the author, and every people who remember their beginning are already on the path back to Him.